What's up, y'all? This is Hussein Nasser from iGeometry, where we discuss software engineering by example. In this video, we will learn how we can use JavaScript to connect to a Postgres database. So we're going to learn how to connect to a database, how we essentially query the database for a table, and we're going to do some DML operations, and we're going to learn about transactions, like a block of transactions where we can commit and roll back stuff. All right, so if you're writing JavaScript code, you would think, like, usually sometimes you need to store some sort of a state in your application. So be it this is a browser or JavaScript running in the browser or JavaScript running on the server, which is Node.js, right? Because JavaScript application or a program need to an execution engine, and this engine is usually V8 and the server, and in the browser it's if it's Chrome, then it's V8, and Firefox uses a different engine. But think of it like it needs an engine to execute, right? And this engine, sometimes you need to connect to a database, okay? So that being said, in this video we'll learn how to essentially use Node.js, right? JavaScript code in Node.js, which is the execution engine, and that will connect to the Postgres database. So here I have a Postgres database on my laptop here, so don't worry if this is this is something new for you. I'll reference a video right here in the cards to show you exactly how to spin up quickly a Postgres instance as a database on your laptop in less than 3 minutes. It's very simple using Docker essentially, right? But if you whether you have an existing database or you spin up your own, that's totally fine, right? But we need some sort of a database. So here I have a table called employees that I created and have some rows, right? And we'll learn just how to essentially query that and display it on the back end, right? Which is the Node.js application. Okay, cool, guys. Let's get started. So what do we need to start this video, this tutorial? What do you need? You need, obviously, number one, you need a Postgres database, right? So I'm gonna reference the video to the database setup and all that stuff. It's very simple, okay? And second, you obviously need Node.js because we're gonna write code on the server or within the client, right? So that's the execution engine, Node.js installation. It's very simple. I'm gonna reference it as well here. It's really literally you download Node.js and run it, and that's all you need. Just install it and you'll be done. Okay. And the third is code, some sort of text editor, and I prefer Visual Studio Code. It's my best editor ever. So with that said, I think we are ready. Let's just jump into the tutorial. Okay, I'm gonna leave some jump cards for you guys to jump to then necessary steps that you need essentially for every single step in the tutorial. All right, with that said, to run the JavaScript code, right, to the Node.js, we need to create a project, okay? And that project is, think of it like it's just a folder, right? So let's go ahead and create a folder here, and let's call this JavaScript Postgres, okay? Then just open that folder, right? That's what I love about Visual Studio Code. You open folders, and then once you open a folder, you can start writing files. You put stuff there in the files, okay? So what I'm gonna do here is I am going to create a file called index.js, which is essentially the start of my application, where most of my code lives here, okay? So before we write any single line of code, and that's another thing I like about Visual Studio Code here, just the moment you install it, and it will tell you, hey, this is JavaScript file. Let me do an IntelliSense for you. We'll install the necessary plugin for you to do JavaScript nicely and very intuitively. So with that said, the first thing we need to do here to write code is to initialize my project, okay? And there are many ways to do this. You can do it from within Visual Studio Code, but it's essentially all from terminal, right? So if you open a new terminal and then you literally say new terminal in Visual Studio Code, it will essentially put you back to the command terminal, which is you can start it from your Mac here, right, or your Windows. machine. Okay, once you have that, you would do npm init. This is the node package manager to initialize your project. Okay, and it will ask you very simple stuff, questions like what's your package name. We're gonna leave it as the same, version same. What's the entry point? Very important. Gonna leave it index.js. Like, or if you chose another name, just name it in whatever.js. That's the enterprise. And the test command is how do you execute this? And executing this is node dot, which is node and then index.js, right? So you can do node index.js, right? Zoom in here so you can see, right? Or you can just say node dot because default is index.js. Well, let's just say that index.js. Okay, repository none, author sure, that's me, license, are you done? Yes. Okay, and that concludes that we are ready to work, right? So that creates like a package JSON which will allow us to install the dependencies, right? Because to connect to Postgres, you need a library, and there's a great library, right? Written in, it's called node-postgres, and that's what we're gonna use here. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our first line of code here. The first thing we need to do is to connect to a database. To connect to a database, you need to create a client object, right? This client object will allow you to connect to the database, right? And by providing the information, you know, what's the username, what's the password, what's the database name, what's the host, right? And all these ports, all this information. Okay, but to do that, you need the client, right? To do that, there are many ways to do it here. Okay, so you provide a constant, which is the default JavaScript type here, because I like to use constant a lot, and then you call it client with capital K, and we're gonna with capital C, and we're gonna go to that, right? Then equal require the Postgres, the library is called PG, which is very easy to remember, unlike the Python one, which is like psycho PG2, I think, something like that, right? So when you do that, okay, you can require that, right? And that's you can just do dot client, right? This is one way to do it. So this will require the entire library, which has a bunch of other classes, but we're interested only in the client here. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Okay, if you have noticed, so this will work, right? But in JavaScript, since we want to be fancy, right? Another way of writing this same line of code is this. Okay. So what happens here is essentially this is equal to, this is essentially exactly equal to, this is equal dot client, right? So when you put it in between curly braces, it will essentially do a dot, and then we'll store that variable. We'll take the object, the property of that require library, and give you that property. So that's one way of doing it. So regardless what you end up with, it will essentially work. Okay, now that we have a client object, now we can actually create a client instance. Remember, this is just object-oriented basic stuff, right? So what we're gonna do is create a client object, and guess what? New client. Okay, to create a new client, we need to send it a JSON object, and that's how the client knows how to connect to the database. Okay, so client is this. If I did not do this step, I would have failed. Okay, because this doesn't exist. Now that I call this client, I can actually do new client. Okay, because I have that variable. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a user, right? The first object, user. What's my user? I know my username is called Postgres, okay, in my database, and the password is called also Postgres, very secure. Host, it's my machine name, so Hussein Mac, or your machine name. In this case, you put your machine name. Port, this is optional, but I like to put it always. the default port of Postgres is 5432, but sometimes that change, so I like to just specify it there. And the database, okay? And the database name is, remember guys, what was the database name? If you ever forget, the database name was Hussein DB. So that's what we're gonna use here, okay? Hussein DB, right? And just like that, we created a client. So, all right. So to connect to the database, there are multiple methods here, right? And I'll give you two methods here, and maybe I'll divide this video into. I'll make it will be a little longer tutorial, but I will show you all the steps essentially, right? So once you have that, you would do client to connect, okay, and connect. Since we have the client object, remember I use this small letter here because that's the object. You don't do capital client. That's you take the object now that is filled with the connection information, and then you say connect on it. Okay. Since this is a promise, this returns a promise. Obviously, you're gonna do .then, which tells you, hey, this has been successful. Okay. So you do console.log connected successfully, right? Once you do that, you would follow it up with the catch, right? What is, in case of an error, I want to show that error, okay? And that's the client, always with the promises, you do .then, and then .catch, and then .finally. We're gonna go through all these steps, right? Catch is, if I get an error, E, okay, I want just to actually print it, okay? Console.log. Right? Or you can use console.error to actually show it as an error, but let's just introduce to one as a step, one step at a time. And finally is finally, right? What do you do finally, all right? The finally is like the finally when using try, right? So when you execute that, it can either go here or here. It won't go on both, right? So if it fails, it will go here and then to go catch, and then it will always execute finally. All right. If it succeeds, it will go to then, and then it will always execute finally. So this is, we use this finally to clean up essentially, right? And the cleanup is client.end, which ends the connection. Very important to end the connection after you're done. Okay. So let's go ahead and execute that. Debug, and we're getting an error, and I want you to see this error now. Cannot find module PG, right? So I deferred this because I want you to see this error. And the reason is very clear because, hey, what is this PG thing? You never installed this thing. So now you actually need to install this. To install it, you go to the terminal, the same path, and you do npm again, and then you do install. Guess what? What's called? PG. You just write PG. And that will install this for your package, just for your package, just for your project. And just like that, we have installed the Postgres, node-postgres client, right? So now that we have a library, everything is okay. Let's go ahead and run it again. So either, again, run it from debugger, or you can run it from, let's go ahead and run it from the debugger. It says, okay, connected successfully, we got it here. Let's run it from here, npm test. And we got also connected successfully. Beautiful, guys. Okay. So now we're gonna leave the catch here, and then we're gonna add another then, which now that we are ready, right? So we have connected. The beauty of this promise in JavaScript is it will just chain things together, right? Everything will just call the second then. As long as it's successful, we'll call the second then, and then you can put more code there. So what I want to do here is, that's how we do functions, by the way, in JavaScript, if you didn't know already. So this is like a one-line function. That's why we can do it easily here. And this is a function without a parameter, okay? This is a function with a parameter called e, which we apparently forgot to print, right? Okay, here. All right, so now that we have done that, I want to print the entire table of employees, okay? So this is really simple to do, okay? How to do? We connected successfully using client.connect, right? And then I'm chaining this. While I'm connected, I want to do a query. So how do I do a query? Very easy. client dot, you guessed it, query. All right, and this is your standard SQL stuff, right? So let's go ahead and do a select star. Very bad idea, guys, but this is the tutorial, so we're exempt from that. But select all from employees. You would never do this in a real production, right? Because that's bad, and that's bad. This is unbounded. But our table has like a 10 rows or whatever, right? So it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now this will execute the query, but this is an asynchronous call. So it will just defer and will, whenever it's ready, it's gonna call the next then, which is, I didn't put it here, right? So I'm gonna put a next then. But this time, this query returns a result. So this function that I'm gonna call has to accept the results, right? It has to accept a parameter. And so my function now will have an actual result, all right? And that result will be essentially the table that was returned for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and do results, and then for simplicity, the results object has an array called rows, which is all the results that got returned. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a console dot. I can do a loop to loop through all the tables, but there is a nice function in console called table, which actually takes an array and prints it in a nice column fashion, right? So think of this dot table is actually a loop, okay? And we do results dot rows, okay? And that will print it. So let's go through the steps again. Zoom in a little bit. Connect. Successfully go here, right? If it's fail, we'll go to catch, right? Successful, right? Go to query. It will query, and then whenever we get the results, we will call this, right? It's like it's always like it's a chain of events, right? And then we're gonna show you maybe after a while. I'm gonna show you the async version of this. So personally, I like this approach to do a then catch finally, because it's kind of it's easier to read. I don't like to do a try catch essentially, but it's all totally, guys, up to you and your preferences. Okay, so I'm gonna show you two methods of doing things. This is one method of them. Okay, if you find this confusing, I'm gonna show you the other method. It's much more readable, but you'll have to do more stuff as well. So totally up to you. So I have everything in place. Let's do a debug and let's see if we got this working. Come on, debugger. Oh, debug console. There you go. Debug console. We have the table printed in a nicely format. And the beauty of this is that you go here and then into terminal and then you do npm test. Test, by the way, is the command name, right? In the npm, right? And you in the terminal you get even a more beautiful view in console.log, which is pretty cool, guys, right? So that's the table view, right? You can easily just return one value. You can manipulate these values and you can do all kind of stuff, right? So let me do one more thing. Let's say I want to show all the employees that are called Edmond only. Okay, so you would do where. Okay, I think in JavaScript we can do this. Now we can't. It does not like it. So where, obviously, name is equal to. So there are many ways to do this, but the best way to avoid SQL injections is to do this, guys, right? You use parameters, okay? And this query is beautiful, it's really nicely done, and I really recommend you to follow the guy who wrote this. He's maintaining this in open source. He's totally doing it for free, and we really appreciate his work. His name is Brian, I think. Okay, and then you do a comma, and you put an array, and that array will be correspond one-to-one to the parameters. Okay, and in this case I want Edmond, right? So that is essentially equivalent to saying comma Edmond, but you never do this in a real production, right? That's why I want to show you these methods. Okay, so now that's one way to do it. Let's go ahead. So now if I run this again, I'm just gonna get Edmond, right? Run it again from here, npm test, and I'm just gonna do this. So another way of running it is just you can say node index.js, which is our file name. Remember, guys, our file name is called index.js. You can say node index.js, and that will execute. So many ways of doing this. You don't have to be in Visual Studio Code. You can go here, and then you go to the, hopefully if I remember, my path. What do we call JavaScript underscore Postgres? If you go here and you say in node index.js, you'll get the nice table in the terminal. Okay, if you say npm test, you'll get the same result because npm test will call the node index.js. That's what will happen, right? But it's nice to add multiple scripts here, like what we're gonna do here. Hopefully, you can write a script that executes this. You can write a script that do a full table, which is like, let's do that, guys. Why not? All right, let's do full table, right? Full table.js, and full table.js is like literally copy paste here, and then without where close. Boo. And we make sure to close. That's very important because it will always close, right? And this is like index.js, our test. And then we'll go to package.json, which is the npm, right? That's the test, and that's our test command, which executes that, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and do full table. And then guess what? This actually execute node. It's called full table.js. Let's see if this thing works, guys. All right, guys. So once you do that, like the multiple commands, right? You can run them with npm run. If you do npm run, it will tell you, hey, you have two commands. You have a command called test, which calls this, and you have a command called full table. So let's do npm run test, or just npm test. That works. Okay. If you do that, npm run test will execute that, which is just Edmond, right? And if you do npm run full table, it will actually execute the full table, right? And that's how you do multiple tests, guys, essentially. That's looks good, guys, looks good. Okay. All right, let's do one more thing here, and we can move to the other script to show you the async stuff, right? Let's do the insert. Maybe I'll do the transactions in another video because it's getting too long, right? So before we're gonna view the table, I am going to insert a new row. Okay, so insert into employees. And then if you do the insert this way, like as a query by itself, then it is a single atomic transaction. What will happen is you'll send the query, and then it will start the transaction, do the query, commit immediately, right? If we want to do multiple queries with multiple transactions, you have to start and end a transaction. With that, let's just stick with this now. And we're gonna discuss the transactions in another episode, right? Maybe step tutorial number 2. Okay, if you guys enjoy this. Insert into employees, right? Values. We need 2 values, right? Again, you never do the values right there. So value number 1, value number 2, and then this is JavaScript doesn't know this, right? This is just purely the query. Whoever wrote this Node.js query Postgres, right? They put it in a way that it takes arguments. Okay, so let's say one of a big number 101 as an ID, and give me our name. John. Do I have a John? I think I have a John, but it doesn't matter. 101 is the clue here. So I'm gonna insert an employee. So let's go ahead and execute that. Okay, and be very mindful of what you're gonna get back, guys. All right, we got it back. Oh, because we are running. What did we change? We changed the full table. I don't want to change the full table. You know what? Let's change the full table. Okay, the full table has an insert statement now in it. Okay, and let's run this. Okay, let's run the full table. npm run full table, and we're gonna get an error here, guys. Okay, and that error is legit. You want to see this error. You want to get this error. Okay, and the error is duplicate key values. We executed it twice. The first time it was successful. The second time, all right, we got an error because 101 actually exists, right? Let's see. Does 101 exist? Yes, it's called neta. right? So let's choose another name, right? Let's choose another number. Okay, apparently 1001, right? So if I save this now and then go to terminal here and then execute no npm run full table, I'm gonna get John 1001. So we added it successfully. But if I run it again, npm run full table, I'm gonna get an error. And that's because this is trying to insert 1001 again, but 1001 is actually a primary key, a PK. Can't be duplicated, son. Right? So that's just like it was immediately committed. You can go back and see that result immediately change there. All right. So now we can stop being fancy and just put your own IDs there, and you can add your own IDs using max or whatever to insert that values. But just showing you here that you can in fact just insert values and just turn around and view them. All right. It makes perfect sense. Right. So we have this one will goes to this array, this value will goes to this, okay? And that's how you basically execute transactions. Very simple stuff, right, guys? But remember, this, whether the same client you're doing this will be a complete atomic transaction. If you want to like insert and update another table and do another stuff and execute multiple stuff, then you might want to do something else, right? So let's show you how you can do the same thing, guys, with an async function. It's the same code exactly. It does the same exact thing, but it just looks different. So, and then it's up to you to pick whatever you prefer. Okay. So let's go ahead and show you how you can do this with sync await. Okay. Let's what are we gonna call it, man? We're gonna call it async full table .js, and then since we added that, might as well just add another package.json command here, and then we can add a full table, async full table. Why not? Then this is called async full table. Nice. And copy paste is your friend, guys. We did the whole thing. So you know what? I'm not gonna do a copy paste here. Let's just write it from scratch so you can actually see it. Okay, again, const client equal require Postgres. We got the client. So now what do we do is we need a function here. Okay, let's call a function called, you can call it anything you want. I'm gonna call it execute. Okay, right, and that function should be asynchronous function. Right? And async, oh wait, I'm not gonna explain it in details here, but in general how it goes is your executor, right, in this case V8 engine or Node.js, will pause before going to the next method. It is asynchronous, but it feels very synchronous, right? And if you were wondering the difference between the two, guys, I'm going to reference a nice video that I did, very popular, between the difference between asynchronous and synchronous functions, right? Just in general to get to you like by example, showing you the difference between the two. All right, but the cool thing about this is like when you call a function, you will pause the execution before you move to the next line of code. So let's go ahead and do the first line of code, which is before we do that, we can actually do it here, I think, right? We can execute a client object equal new client, remember? And then again, the user, Postgres, the password, Postgres, and then obviously the host, where are you connecting from, to, I mean, my Hussein Mac machine, what's the port, 5432, and then what else? Obviously the most important thing is the database, Hussein DB. Nice. All right, you can also put this here, doesn't really matter, but I just want to reuse it over and over again, right? I don't want this function to get confusing. So client, what is the first thing we do? We do connect, but then we're not gonna use then, right? This is actually returning a promise, right? And in the previous code, we chained this promise. It says, okay, dot, That returns a result, and then we do the dot then, because it keeps returning a promise. Whether a promise is resolved, like a then, or rejected, will go catch. Eventually, will go to finally. Okay. Here, what we do is essentially you just call await before it. Okay, and that will give you exactly the same, same result. Right. So let's go ahead and do. After that, I want to do connected successfully. Feels very intuitive if you think about it, right, guys? Because hey, if I connect here, I'm gonna pause the execution, the pointer. If you, I don't know if you see my mouse here, but that once I call connect, I'm gonna pause. The execution will pause. Will never go to the next line until it's finished, right? But that will not actually block anything else. It will do completely using different technology, right? It will just using generators. Okay, so we'll wait here. Once you're done, we'll go and connect successfully. Boom, you're done. And then once you do that, complete it successfully, now we can actually execute a query, right? So you can do const results equal client.query, and then let's do select all from employees. Nice. If you don't declare this function as async, you will never be able to do await here, okay? But another thing we forgot here, since this is again another asynchronous function, you have to call await. If you don't do that, this code will immediately execute and it start executing the code below it, okay? Once we got the result, what do we do with the results? We do dot table, okay? Then results.row. Okay. All right, so this is the same thing, right? Since this is returning results, we can, if you think about it, let's take it step by step. Let's just see if this is working first. Okay. All right, once you're done, obviously you will close the connection, and then to close it, you would do client.end. Okay, and then again, you always do await before calling any of these functions. And then you do console.log. We didn't do that previously, but it doesn't matter. Client disconnected successfully, whatever, right? But then, if you think about it, this is taking care of things that if everything goes perfectly and dandy, right? But what if the things fail? You have to add your own try catch to deal with stuff. That's what I don't like about this approach. Okay, but let's see if things dandy. If everything is dandy and happy, right? Let's go ahead and execute that. Sure, and obviously you saw me call the function, right? Because this is a function we'll never call unless someone called it, right? And the execution is just boom, boom, and then execute. Okay, let's go ahead and call npm run. I forgot the name, so I'm going to just npm run. So npm run async full table, and if I do that, I get the same exact result, right? But if it fails, then you have to deal with failures, right? Like the one when fail with primary key violation. Okay, it will never catch it in this case, right? So you'll have to actually, your code is not complete until you do it this way. Okay, you will do try catch, right, wherever ex, and then you say console.log something wrong happened, and then you do, let's use the text here, right, ex, and then you can do finally, same thing here, right? Finally console.log, you can move the two codes actually here, right? Finally. So this is where things go right, this is where things might go wrong, and this eventually they will both call this function, and they will I forgot to add another curly braces here, guys. Okay, this is where things go right, this is where things go wrong, this is where things eventually end up. What the hell, why do I have an extra? That's weird. It's complaining. I don't know why. Alright, we'll see why it's complaining in a second, but it's complaining. Alright, so why are you complaining, sir? We have one. This is the, we're missing a curly braces, guys, here. This is closing this. This is, oh, this has nothing. Oh, there. Oh man, seriously? Okay. Yeah, we had an extra one. Okay, guys. All right, sorry. npm. Sorry. npm start run async table, and that's where things go right. Okay. So if you fail, let's do something that failed, right? Let's do, for example, here, let's execute insert into employees values 1 and John. Okay, that's bad, but it's just testing, showing you that's another way of doing things, but that's a bad way of doing things. Okay, so, and that's query results. Usually insert does not return anything, right? Because it's just say, hey, do that. It doesn't return a result, so you don't have to get results back. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it again, and that's your error right there. Something wrong happened. That's our, so we know that this will fail because 1 does exist, right? We have that 1 is right there. Hussein is number 1. So now what happened? Boo, died. It immediately goes to catch. Something wrong happened, and then we executed the error, which is our duplicate key values, right? Unique constraint. Okay, so both have some advantages and disadvantages to this method, right? If you go to client, then eventually we'll call finally. But I like this method as well because it's easier to debug, because you can just do this. Let me show you, right? Oh, let me modify my debugger to actually read from this thing instead. Okay, so you go to option, then execute, what is it called? Async full table instead. And then let's go ahead. So what we'll do is it will execute that, and we'll just show you that immediately, right? With the then it's very hard to execute, very hard to debug. Yeah. So this is will go ahead, and then this will fail. Immediately will take you there. Okay. It's nice. It feels very synchronous. Feels very intuitive to the coding that we used to do. It's just the try catch is ugly with the old curly braces. But I guess there is no solution to this. It's really up to you guys. Both methods are cool. I like the other methods if you don't do much debugging, but obviously this will execute that, and eventually will end the client, and eventually will do that, and you're done. Okay. So, all right, guys, let's do some more debugging here and show you how the results object look like. I just go ahead and I commented this line so our script doesn't fail, and then I changed the configuration back to the async full table, and let's go ahead and just start that and show you how it looks. How about that, guys? So the first thing we're gonna do is execute, connect, poof, done, right? And then print that, and then go ahead and execute the select all star. That will give me the results, and you can just look at the results, which is pretty neat, right? You can just take a look at the results. These are the rows that we're interested in, right? And then each row you can just take each row. This is an array of objects, right? And each object is ID and name, ID and name, ID and name. Okay, and then you can just do all kind of manipulation with this, right? Return the results, get the first result, do fancy stuff, and so on, right? And then what it does is like results is actually this whole big JSON object, right? But we only want to print the table, which is rows. Okay, so that's why we did results.rows. Okay. Okay, and then we continue running that, and then we get this nice table, right? So remember, based on this format, which is here, we can do the same thing, right? So since results has .rows in them, what happens if I do this, right? Can I do this? Is this valid? It is, because this returns the results object, okay? And this means give me the property called rows and store it in a variable called rows. Okay, and this only works if the variable is actually the same name as the object name. Okay, so rows, you have to call it rows. You cannot call it rows1. It will fail. Okay, yeah, you have to say rows, and that's basically the whole result.rows, and that's another way of writing things in the JavaScript. Let's see if it works. Right, and it works, guys. This time you only get the rows, right? and then you just boom, print all of them. Okay, cool. All right, guys. I actually, since this is almost like 40 minutes, let's complete the hour and do transactions. How about that, guys? Let's do transactions, right, guys? And let's do them in the async manner. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new JS file. Let's call it what do you call it? Transactions.js, whatever. Okay, and then same thing. I like to rewrite everything from scratch. I don't like to copy paste much, if you notice, guys, because if it's just, this is how I learn personally, right? I write things and more and more and more, right, over and over again, and it just like sticks in my head, and I just remember them, right? Copy and paste will just stick. You don't feel with the code anymore. You don't have feelings with the code. If you write it, then you actually understand it more. Okay, the more you write it. Okay, require PG. I know that there is a client object called PG. Okay, and then we do here is, this is what we're gonna do. We will do const client equal new client. All right, and then you just do user Postgres password Postgres, right? So the more you type this, right, it's just like it makes more sense, right? It's just like this is how you basically learn. You write more software, guys. That's how you become better software engineer. Just keep writing software, right? And with each line of code you write, you become better and better. Okay. But if you keep copying and pasting, it will work, but it won't take you so far. Right? Async function execute. So it's like even me, right? I learned JavaScript. You'll be surprised. I learned JavaScript in 2017, which is like what, 2 years ago, and I didn't study it. Like I didn't go to courses or anything. Right? I mean, I went to a course, but I left the course, didn't understand anything. Okay, it was like was more confused, and because there was no examples in the course, there was no by examples. Just like, hey, this is code, and just write it down. I don't know. I just don't like that method of teaching. Best way to learn any programming language, guys, learn it from me, right? Just write more software with that language. If you want to learn JavaScript, don't go how to learn JavaScript, whatever. Go and build an application with JavaScript, right? Build a calculator or build something, right, with the state or Postgres, and do things, right? You have to do something useful with it, right? Any application, and then just immediately learn it. Okay, I'll try to shut up, guys, and I'll just code. Sorry. Execute. We're gonna execute that. What are we gonna do? Okay, we're gonna connect, and we're gonna await a result. We don't really need to console print every time, but query. This is the trick. To begin a transaction, you do begin, and then when you're done, you do commit, right? And if you don't want the transaction to ever get executed, okay, you do client.query rollback, right? It's very simple, right? So now let's show you what will happen here and compare the results. Okay, so what we're gonna do is client.insert. Oh, sorry. That's what I'm telling you guys. You don't really remember everything, right? Insert. So this will begin as a transaction, and then I'm gonna insert into employees. 1 and 2 values. What I'm doing is, sorry, values, this, and then let's just give it an array. Then I don't know, 1008. I'm almost something that doesn't exist there. Okay, if I do that, and then Ali, for example, and then I go ahead and execute that thing, right? Let me show you what exactly will happen. Forgot our await here. Okay, I didn't put a try catch. That's bad, but let's do this here, guys. Okay, console.log inserted a new row, and the row is called 1008, right? So let's go ahead and change the debugging so it points from tx.js, right? Then go back and then run debug. It's important to do debugging here. Obviously, I didn't call execute because I'm right. And then sorry. So this is another thing, right? You have to do a try catch, guys. You cannot escape the try catch. It will just yell at you. It will just like say, hey, you didn't do an promise rejection, right? You didn't catch the rejected promise. Okay. Promise me failed to execute something. Then ax. Right. I don't know, guys. I explained this. This is the backtick notation, which is equivalent to doing console.log fail to execute something, and then you do that, and then you do that. This is equivalent to this, right? But this is much better. Okay. This is instead of adding pluses and then if you do this like hey plus this is not cool, right? You can just do this right here. This is not cool. In the same string, right? Which is insane. And then finally, remember guys, what do we do finally? We close the thing. Don't ever forget to close your connection, guys. You don't want these things leaking. Okay. Console.log cleaned, baby. Cleaned. Alright, let's do this. I think it will now yell at me. Oh, it's yelling a database Hussein Mac does not exist. This is not cool. What? Oh, I'm sorry, Hussein DB. I forgot I gave the database. Oh, that's actually a nice error. Okay, so it failed because I give it a bad name, right? That's the thing. If you fail, the more you fail with errors, you'll learn more, right, guys? That's if everything is going dandy and successful. This is a new word I learned, dandy, yesterday from Red Dead Redemption 2. Just playing this game now, love it. All right, okay. So now I run begin. I am about to run this, but I'm not gonna commit it. I just inserted it, okay, and I'm not even gonna do that. If I go back. And then I say, sir, where is my 1008 row? I do not see it here in the database. Physically in the database, I queried, and there's nothing. There's no such thing as 1008. You can see that, guys, right? Poof, 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 poof. There's nothing. Okay? But the moment I do this, actually, the moment I do this, then I go and query, and you can see Ali. Ali is here. Salam Allah alayh. Look at that. Nice. And then obviously goes to finally and cleaning things. And nice. Right? So actually commit the transaction. Right? What do you want to do in case of an error? If anything goes wrong, anything for any reason, you don't want to commit, you want to roll it back. Right? Okay, so like, hey, I'm doing insert and another update and maybe a fancy stuff. Let's just do this. Let's go nuts, right? Let's say someone got access to the update employees. Set name equal, everybody is now called Ray Donovan, right? Damn it. This Ray. Everybody's Ray now. Okay, Ray Donovan hacked everything, and then just he's just nuts. He updated all the employees to have the same name. I have no idea why he did that. Don't ask me, okay? But he did it, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Query, and then we have an error. That's actually cool, all right? If I do that, it fails, right? And then you're gonna roll back, and then we're done, okay? Let's flip the equation here. If I do that, let's go ahead and debug. If I do that, I just updated all the employees' name. Now, everybody's called Ray, obviously in the database. It's not committed, right? But the moment I execute that will fail, and that will roll back the transaction, okay? But let's do that. Right after this, I am going to actually do const rows equal this. I don't need to do all that. That will be just select all the employees and see from employees. Okay, select all the employees, and we're gonna inspect the rows here. Console.table rows. Okay, just print the rows here. Okay, what do you think will happen, guys? Since I did it in the same transaction, I just updated all the rows. Everybody's named Ray within this scope, within this transaction. Okay, but in the database, it is not the same thing at all. Okay, it's still intact, right? And then I am going to insert this, which will fail, 1008. And I, by the way, did discuss the atomic transactions in another list of videos there. Hopefully it get recommended to you by YouTube, but if not, then you can check out the description below or the cards. I talk about all kind of dirty reads and all that stuff, right? All the database stuff. So if this will fail, which says, hey, what we do? We just updated everything. You need to roll that back, sir. Roll. What the hell did I do? Okay, roll back, and then we'll roll back and clean everything up. Okay, guys, that's some sort of an example of things that you can go and write code with. So that's a transaction. That's how you do a transaction with Node.js. Okay, the author of this nice library also had the concept of pooling. I might do another video of this, right? But pooling essentially is just like you have a pool of connection, and just for especially when you're writing an Express app or web app server, you want every request that comes to, if it's like idempotent, if it's like you want it stateless, then each request will be served by a different pool of connection, and whenever you're done, you will release the client connection. So instead of doing this connect, which is expensive, if your application has thousands or 2,000s or million user, connect is very expensive. You don't want every user to connect, right? So you want to have a pool of connections, okay, and these connections will just be released and returned to the pool whenever you want to execute something. You get a connection from the pool, execute your stuff, and then whenever you're done, you just release it. You don't end it, you release it. Okay, so that's another way, because just like to enable scalability, essentially, right? We don't want you to worry about that. If you're writing a simple application, you can still just use this method. The disadvantage of this is you're connecting and disconnecting for every single request or for every single execution. But it's okay if you're doing one job, like you run the script, you do something, you insert a massive amount of rows, or you do something like that. You can eventually use that. All right, guys, I think I am going to stop here. I swear. All right, it's been an hour. But it's a full tutorial, guys, that I'm providing this to you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you're still watching, thank you so much. You made it until the end of the tutorial, right? And obviously, guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you're new here, if you just met, my name is Hussein. I like to do this in my free time. I love coding. Okay. I have this YouTube channel where we discuss software engineering by example. We do tutorials like these. We do mobile tutorials where we take a live application like Twitter and try to reverse engineer that, how it works. So anything software engineering, you've come to the right place. So consider subscribing if you like this stuff, right? Will really boost the channel. And leave a like on this video if you really like it. And I'm going to see you in the next one. You guys stay awesome.